Maya groaned as the shrill ringing of her phone pierced through the silence of her bedroom. She squinted at the clock. It was 3 a.m., just a couple of hours after she had returned from her night shift at the hospital. With a sigh, she grabbed the phone, expecting it to be the hospital calling her back for an emergency. "Hello?" she mumbled groggily. "Maya, it's me." The familiar voice of her husband Reed crackled through the line. "We need to talk." Maya sat upright, suddenly wide awake. There was something in Reed's tone that made her stomach churn with dread. "What is it?" she asked cautiously. "I'm leaving you," Reed stated bluntly. "I've met someone else, and I want a divorce." Maya's heart dropped to the pit of her stomach as the words sank in. She had been happily married to Reed for over 20 years, and they had a son together. How could he do this to their family? "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "After everything we've been through together?" Reed let out a callous chuckle that sent shivers down Maya's spine. "Come on, Maya. You're no spring chicken anymore. I've found someone younger, someone who can give me the excitement and passion that you can't." Maya's hands trembled as she clutched the phone tighter. "Who is she? How long has this been going on?" "Her name is Jill, and that's none of your business." Reed snapped. "I want you out of the house by the end of the week. I've already spoken to a lawyer, and I'll be generous with the settlement, but I want a clean break." Maya's mind raced, trying to process the bombshell that Reed had just dropped on her. She had always been devoted to their marriage, working long hours as a nurse to support their family while Reed pursued his career. And now he was casting her aside like she meant nothing. "You arrogant bastard," Maya spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you can just waltz in and out of my life as you please? You have no idea what you've just unleashed." Reed scoffed. "Save the drama, Maya. Just pack your things and go. I'll be in touch with the divorce papers." And with that, he hung up, leaving Maya seething with rage and betrayal. As the tears streamed down her cheeks, she made a vow to herself. Reed and his little mistress would pay dearly for what they had done to her family. This was just the beginning. After the initial shock of Reed's betrayal wore off, Maya knew she had to take action. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, would only fuel her anger and despair. She needed to gather her wits and fight back. The first order of business was to find a good divorce lawyer. Maya didn't want to go through some run-of-the-mill attorney who would just rubber stamp whatever settlement Reed proposed. No, she needed someone who was a shark, someone who could ruthlessly protect her interests and make Reed pay for what he had done. Maya spent the next few days scouring the internet and making phone calls until she finally found the perfect candidate, Samantha Weston, a pit bull of a lawyer known for her tenacity and her ability to sniff out hidden assets in messy divorces. At their first meeting, Maya laid out the situation bluntly. "My husband is leaving me for another woman," she stated, her voice laced with barely contained fury. "He thinks he can just discard me like a piece of trash after over 20 years of marriage." Samantha's eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping on the desk. "I see," she said, her tone businesslike. "And I take it you want to make sure he doesn't get away with it?" Maya nodded fiercely. "I want to bleed him dry," she hissed, "and I want to expose him and his little mistress for the snakes they are." A predatory smile spread across Samantha's face. "Then you've come to the right place, Mrs. Westwood." Over the next few weeks, Maya and Samantha worked tirelessly, combing through financial records, tracking down hidden assets, and building an airtight case against Reed. It turned out that the bastard had been squirreling away money for years, no doubt in preparation for his little midlife crisis fling. "Look at this," Samantha said one day, sliding a sheaf of papers across the desk. "He's got a secret offshore account with over $500,000 in it, and here are the records of him transferring funds to a woman named Jill Hansen. I'm guessing that's his little piece on the side." Maya's hands trembled with rage as she looked at the damning evidence. "That snake," she spat. "He's been playing me for a fool all these years." Samantha patted her hand reassuringly. "Don't worry, Maya. We're going to make sure he doesn't get away with any of it." With Samantha's guidance, Maya systematically began freezing Reed's accounts and cutting off his access to the funds he had stashed away. She also gathered evidence of his emotional infidelity, documenting phone records and hidden email exchanges between him and his mistress. Finally, the day came when Maya was ready to confront Reed face to face. She arranged a meeting at a neutral location, under the pretense of discussing a settlement. But when Reed showed up, cocky and arrogant as ever, he was in for a rude awakening. "What's this about, Maya?" he sneered, taking a seat across from her. "I thought we were going to keep things civil." Maya fixed him with a steely gaze, her hands clenched into fists under the table. "Civil?" she echoed, her voice dripping with contempt. "You want to talk about civil after you've been lying and cheating on me for God knows how long?" Reed's smug expression faltered as Maya began laying out the evidence, the bank statements, the emails, the phone records. With each damning piece of proof, his face grew paler and paler until he was visibly sweating. How did you find all of this?" he stammered, his bravado evaporating. Maya leaned back in her chair, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. "I have my ways," she said simply. "And this is just the beginning, Reed. You and your little whore are going to pay for what you've done to me and our family." As she watched her soon-to-be ex-husband squirm, Maya knew that she was just getting started. The real battle was yet to come, but for the first time since Reed had dropped his bombshell, she felt a sense of empowerment. She was no longer the victim. She was the hunter, and Reed and his mistress were the prey. With Samantha's help, Maya wasted no time in striking back at Reed and his mistress, Jill. The first step was to freeze all of Reed's hidden accounts and cut off his access to the funds he had squirreled away. "We need to move quickly," Samantha advised, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Once Reed realizes what's happening, he'll try to move the money around and hide it elsewhere." Maya nodded, her jaw set in a grim line. "Do whatever it takes. I want him to feel the same panic and betrayal that I felt when he dropped that bombshell on me." Over the next few days, Maya watched with a sense of grim satisfaction as Samantha systematically dismantled Reed's financial web. One by one, his secret accounts were frozen, his credit cards canceled, and his access to funds cut off. When Reed finally realized what was happening, he came storming into Samantha's office, his face flushed with rage. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, slamming his fist on the desk. "Why can't I access my accounts?" Samantha leaned back in her chair, her eyes cool and appraising. "I think you know exactly why, Mr. Westwood," she said calmly. "Your little financial shenanigans have been exposed, and we're taking steps to ensure you don't try to hide any more assets." Reed's eyes darted to Maya, who was sitting in the corner, watching the confrontation unfold. "You," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You did this, didn't you?" Maya met his gaze levelly, her expression betraying no emotion. "You brought this on yourself, Reed," she said quietly. "You thought you could just discard me like yesterday's trash and ride off into the sunset with your little trollop. Well, think again." Reed's face contorted with rage, and for a moment Maya thought he might strike her. But then Samantha cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "I'd be very careful about how you proceed, Mr. Westwood," she said, her tone laced with subtle menace. "We have all the evidence we need to ensure you get the divorce settlement you deserve, which is to say next to nothing." Reed's shoulders slumped, and he sank into a chair, his bravado deflating like a punctured balloon. "You can't do this," he muttered, his voice tinged with desperation. "That money was mine. I earned it." Samantha shook her head, a predatory smile playing on her lips. "Not according to the law," she said. "And by the time we're done, you'll be lucky if you can afford a cardboard box to live in." As Reed sat there, his head in his hands, Maya felt a surge of satisfaction. For years, she had been the dutiful wife, putting her own dreams and ambitions on hold to support Reed's career and raise their son. And this was how he had repaid her, by betraying her in the most callous and cruel way possible. But now, the tables had turned. Maya was the one holding all the cards, and Reed was the one who was about to lose everything. As she watched him sitting there, defeated and broken, she couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. This was just the beginning, she knew. There was still a long road ahead, with more battles to be fought and more emotional turmoil to endure. But for the first time since Reed's bombshell revelation, Maya felt a sense of hope. She was no longer the victim. She was the architect of her own revenge, and she was going to make damn sure that Reed and his mistress paid for what they had done. As she left Samantha's office, Maya held her head high, her stride confident and purposeful. She was a woman reborn, and she was just getting started. As Maya began to piece together her plan for revenge against Reed and his mistress Jill, she found an unexpected ally in her own son, Ethan. It had been a few days since the confrontation at Samantha's office, and Maya was sitting at home, poring over the mountain of evidence they had gathered against Reed. That's when Ethan walked in, his brow furrowed with concern. "Mom, is everything okay?" he asked tentatively. "I've been hearing some rumors around town about you and Dad." Maya sighed, running a hand through her hair. She hadn't wanted to burden Ethan with the messy details of her failing marriage, but she knew she couldn't keep him in the dark forever. "Your father has been unfaithful," she said bluntly. "He's been carrying on an affair with another woman for God knows how long, and now he wants to leave me for her." Ethan's eyes widened in shock and then narrowed in anger. "That bastard!" he spat. "How could he do that to you after everything you've sacrificed for this family?" Maya shook her head warily. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I'm not going to let him get away with it. Samantha and I are building a case against him, and we're going to make sure he pays for what he's done." To her surprise, Ethan's expression hardened with determination. "Then I want to help," he said firmly. "Dad's not the only one with skills around here." Maya raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Ethan had always been a whiz with computers and technology, and she couldn't help but wonder what he had in mind. Over the next few days, Ethan became her trusted ally in the fight against Reed and Jill. Using his hacking skills and intimate knowledge of the dark web, he was able to uncover a wealth of information about Jill, her background, her financial history, and even some unsavory details about her past relationships. "Looks like our dear Jill has a bit of a track record," Ethan said grimly, sliding a sheaf of printouts across the table to Maya. "She's been involved with at least 2 other married men before Dad, and she's got a knack for making sure she gets a nice little payout when things go south." Maya's eyes narrowed as she scanned the documents. "The little gold digger," she muttered. "So that's her game." Ethan nodded, his expression grim. "Exactly. And it looks like she's been working Dad over for months, maybe even years, slowly convincing him to squirrel away money and assets for their little love nest." Maya felt a surge of white-hot anger coursing through her veins. Not only had Reed betrayed her in the most callous way possible, but he had been planning this whole sordid affair with Jill for God knows how long, right under her nose. "We're going to take them down," she said, her voice low and trembling with fury. "Both of them. They're going to wish they never crossed paths with the Westwood family." Ethan reached across the table and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Don't worry, Mom," he said, his eyes glinting with determination. "We've got this. Dad and his little side piece don't stand a chance against us." As Maya looked at her son, she felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Despite the betrayal and heartbreak she was facing, she wasn't alone in this fight. Ethan was her rock, her partner in crime, and together they were going to make sure that Reed and Jill paid for every ounce of pain and humiliation they had caused. With a newfound sense of purpose, Maya turned her attention back to the evidence laid out before her. It was time to start putting their plan into action. With Ethan's help, Maya had uncovered a wealth of damning information about Jill and her history of preying on wealthy married men. Armed with this knowledge, she knew it was time to take the next step in her plan for revenge. "We need to bring Reed and Jill down in a big way," Maya said grimly, spreading out the evidence they had gathered on the kitchen table. "A way that will humiliate them and make them realize the full extent of what they've done." Ethan nodded, his expression grim. "I'm with you, Mom. Just say the word, and we'll make it happen." After some thought, Maya came up with the perfect plan. She would arrange a meeting with Reed and Jill under the guise of discussing a potential settlement for the divorce. But instead of a civilized negotiation, it would be a full-on confrontation, with all of their dirty laundry laid bare for the world to see. "I want them to feel the same shame and humiliation that they've inflicted on me," Maya said, her eyes flashing with determination. "I want to strip away all of their lies and deceptions, and expose them for the snakes that they truly are. Ethan grinned, a wolfish glint in his eye. Consider it done, Mom. Over the next few days, Maya and Ethan worked tirelessly to set the stage for their grand reveal. They rented out a private room at an upscale restaurant and quietly extended invitations to a select group of Reed and Jill's friends and colleagues, people whose opinions and respect meant everything to the vain, status-conscious couple. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. Maya took a deep breath as she smoothed her hands over her sleek, tailored dress, steeling herself for the confrontation to come. "You ready for this, Mom?" Ethan asked, giving her arm a reassuring squeeze. Maya nodded, her jaw set with determination. "More than ready," she replied. "It's time for these two to face the music." When Reed and Jill arrived, they were all smiles and false pleasantries, completely oblivious to the trap that had been laid for them. As they made their way to the private room, Maya couldn't help but notice the smug, self-satisfied looks on their faces, as if they had already won, as if they thought they could simply waltz away from the wreckage of their betrayal without consequence. But as soon as they stepped through the door and saw the gathered crowd of their friends and colleagues, their expressions shifted to ones of confusion and unease. "What's going on here?" Reed demanded, his voice wavering slightly. Maya stepped forward, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "What's going on, dear husband, is that your little secret is out," she said, her voice ringing out clearly in the hushed room. "Everyone here knows about your sordid affair with this woman and the lies and deceit you've been peddling for God knows how long." Jill's face went pale, and she clutched at Reed's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his flesh. "Reed, what is she talking about?" she hissed, her voice tinged with panic. But Reed could only stare at Maya, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish as the full weight of her revelation sank in. With a grim sense of satisfaction, Maya began to lay out the evidence they had gathered, the financial records, the emails, the sordid details of Jill's history as a gold digger and home wrecker. With each damning piece of proof, the murmurs and gasps from the assembled crowd grew louder, until the room was a cacophony of outrage and disbelief. As Maya reached the climax of her exposé, she fixed Reed and Jill with a look of pure undisguised contempt. "You two thought you could betray me, betray our family, and just walk away without consequence," she said, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Well, you were wrong, dead wrong." In that moment, as she looked at the ashen-stricken faces of her soon-to-be ex-husband and his mistress, Maya felt a surge of triumph and vindication. They had been laid bare, their carefully constructed facade of lies and deceit torn away, leaving them exposed and vulnerable before the very people whose respect and admiration they craved. As the crowd erupted in a chorus of condemnation and scathing whispers, Reed and Jill could only cling to each other, their eyes wide with shock and humiliation. In that moment, Maya knew that she had won, not just the legal battle, but the war for her dignity and self-respect. She was no longer the wronged wife, the silent victim of her husband's betrayal. She was the avenging angel, the one who had struck back with righteous fury and emerged victorious. And as she stood there, basking in the sweet taste of her hard-won revenge, Maya knew that this was just the beginning. The aftermath of the grand reveal at the restaurant was even more satisfying than Maya could have imagined. As the shocked murmurs and whispers of condemnation swirled around them, Reed and Jill could only stand there, paralyzed with humiliation and shame. "How could you do this to me?" Jill hissed at Reed, her perfectly coiffed facade crumbling as tears of rage streamed down her face. "You said nobody would find out." Reed opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish, but no words came out. His usual arrogant bravado was nowhere to be found, replaced by a look of utter defeat and despair. Maya couldn't help but relish the sight of the two of them, so thoroughly exposed and brought low. After months of planning and strategizing, her revenge was finally complete, and oh, how sweet it tasted. But she wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. "You two haven't seen anything yet," she said, her voice ringing out loud and clear above the clamor. "This is just the beginning." Jill's head whipped around, her eyes narrowing with rage. "What are you talking about, you crazy bitch?" she spat, her carefully cultivated veneer of innocence cracking even further. Maya simply smiled. a cold, predatory smile that sent a shiver down Jill's spine. "Oh, you'll see," she said ominously. "You'll both see." Over the next few weeks, Maya made good on her promise. With the help of Samantha and Ethan, she unleashed a relentless legal and public relations assault on Reed and Jill, determined to strip them of every last shred of dignity and financial security. In the courtroom, Samantha was a force of nature, decimating Reed's feeble attempts at defense with a barrage of evidence and legal maneuvering. Time and again, the judge ruled in Maya's favor, awarding her a sizable portion of Reed's assets and ordering him to pay punitive damages for emotional distress and financial betrayal. "You brought this on yourself, Mr. Westwood," the judge said sternly, as Reed sat there, his head in his hands. "Your actions were reprehensible, and you will pay the price." But the real coup de grace came outside the courtroom, where Ethan and Maya waged a scorched-earth campaign to destroy Jill's reputation and social standing. Using the information they had uncovered about her sordid past, they leaked damning details to the press and circulated them on social media, painting her as a manipulative gold digger who preyed on wealthy men for her own personal gain. Within weeks, Jill's carefully cultivated image was in tatters. She was shunned by her former friends and social circles, her name mud in the eyes of the very people whose approval she craved so desperately. "How could you do this to me?" she sobbed to Maya one day, cornering her in the courthouse parking lot. "I was just trying to find happiness, like anyone else." Maya fixed her with a withering glare, her contempt for the other woman radiating off her in waves. "Happiness?" she scoffed. "Is that what you call destroying families and ruining lives? You got exactly what you deserved, Jill. And if you know what's good for you, you'll slink back into whatever hole you crawled out of and disappear for good." As Jill dissolved into a fresh bout of tears, Maya turned on her heel and walked away, her head held high. She had won, not just the legal battle, but the war for her dignity and self-respect. Reed and Jill had been utterly decimated, their lives and reputations in ruins. And as she looked towards the future, Maya felt a sense of hope and possibility that she hadn't felt in years. She was free from the shackles of her failed marriage, free from the weight of Reed's betrayal, and free to start anew. With Ethan by her side and a sizable settlement in her pocket, the world was her oyster. And as she made plans to invest in a new business venture, something she had always dreamed of doing, but never had the courage or means to pursue. Maya knew that this was just the beginning of her new life. The road ahead would be full of challenges, no doubt, but she was ready to face them head-on, stronger and more resilient than ever before. She had stared down the abyss of heartbreak and betrayal, and she had emerged victorious, her spirit unbroken and her thirst for justice quenched. As she walked into the bright, promising future that lay ahead, Maya couldn't help but smile. She was a new woman, forged in the fires of her own hard-won revenge, and nothing and no one would ever break her again. As the legal battles raged on in the courtroom, Maya found herself engaged in a ferocious tug-of-war with Reed and his lawyers. They had clearly underestimated her resolve and the strength of the case that Samantha had built against him. Time and again, Reed's team would try to poke holes in the evidence, or argue that Maya's actions had been overly vindictive and damaging to his reputation. But Samantha was having none of it, countering their every move with a ruthless precision that left them floundering. "Your client's behavior was reprehensible, counselor," Samantha said coolly during one particularly heated exchange. "He betrayed his wife's trust in the most callous and calculated way possible. If his reputation has suffered, it's entirely his own doing." Reed shot Maya a venomous glare from across the courtroom, his face flushed with impotent rage. But Maya simply met his gaze head-on, her expression one of steely determination. She wasn't about to back down, not after everything she had been through. As the weeks dragged on, the legal maneuvering intensified, with both sides digging in their heels and refusing to give an inch. But slowly, inexorably, the weight of the evidence began to shift in Maya's favor. One by one, the judge's rulings chipped away at Reed's defenses, awarding Maya a larger share of the marital assets and ordering Reed to pay hefty damages for his emotional and financial betrayal. "This court finds that Mr. Westwood's actions were not only egregious but premeditated," the judge said sternly, his gavel punctuating each word like a hammer blow. He systematically concealed assets and lied to his wife, all in service of his own selfish desires. Such behavior cannot and will not be tolerated. As the judge continued to read out the details of the settlement, Maya felt a surge of vindication coursing through her veins. This was it, the moment she had been fighting for, the moment when Reed's arrogance and deceit would finally catch up to him in a way he could never have imagined. When the final tally was read out, the look on Reed's face was one of utter disbelief and despair. Not only had he lost a significant portion of his assets and savings, but he had also been ordered to pay Maya a staggering sum in damages, a figure that would effectively cripple him financially for years to come. "This can't be happening," he muttered, his head in his hands as his lawyers attempted to console him. "How could she do this to me?" Maya couldn't help but let out a derisive snort at his words. How could he still be playing the victim after everything he had put her through? The sheer audacity of the man was staggering. As she left the courthouse that day, basking in the glow of her hard-won victory, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction that went beyond mere revenge. She had faced down her betrayer, her tormentor, and she had emerged victorious. Not just legally, but morally and emotionally as well. Reed's arrogance and conceit had been his downfall, and now he was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life and reputation. And as for Jill, the woman who had so callously helped him destroy their marriage, well, she had already paid a heavy price. Her name and social standing in tatters, thanks to Maya and Ethan's relentless campaign of exposure. As Maya looked towards the future, she couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and possibility. With her legal battles finally behind her and a sizable settlement in hand, she was free to pursue her dreams and start anew, unburdened by the weight of her past. And this time, she vowed, no one would ever hold her back or underestimate her again. She was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had stared down the abyss of betrayal and emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. As she climbed into her car and pulled away from the courthouse, leaving the ghosts of her failed marriage behind, Maya couldn't help but smile. The road ahead was wide open, and she couldn't wait to see where it would lead her next. With the legal battles finally behind her, Maya felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The long, arduous road to justice and revenge had taken its toll, but in the end she had emerged victorious, her spirit unbroken, her dignity intact. As she sat down with Ethan to discuss their plans for the future, she couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement bubbling up within her. For the first time in years, she was truly free. Free from the shackles of her failed marriage, free from the weight of Reed's betrayal, and free to pursue her dreams without fear or constraint. "So, what's next, Mom?" Ethan asked, a hopeful glint in his eye. "You've got a pretty hefty settlement to work with. Any ideas on how you want to spend it?" Maya paused for a moment, considering her options. In truth, she had been toying with an idea for years, a dream that she had always pushed aside in service of her family and her marriage. But now, with the world at her feet and a sizable nest egg at her disposal, she felt like the time was finally right. "You know how I've always talked about opening my own little cafe or bakery?" she said, her voice brimming with excitement. "Well, I think I'm finally going to do it." Ethan's face lit up with a broad grin. "That's amazing, Mom," he exclaimed. "I always knew you had it in you, and hey, with my tech skills and your baking talents, we could make one hell of a team." Maya couldn't help but chuckle at her son's enthusiasm. Throughout the long, grueling ordeal with Reed and Jill, Ethan had been her rock, her unwavering support system and partner in crime. And now, as they embarked on this new chapter of their lives, it felt only natural that they should do it together. "You're absolutely right," she said, reaching across the table to give his hand a squeeze. "We make a great team, and with your help, I know we can make this little dream of mine a reality." Over the next few weeks, Maya and Ethan threw themselves into the planning and preparation for their new venture. They scouted locations, pored over business plans, and even took a few cooking classes together to brush up on their skills. It was a whirlwind of activity, but Maya thrived on the energy and excitement of it all. After years of living in the shadow of Reed's betrayal, she felt alive again, like she was finally taking control of her own destiny and forging a path that was truly her own. And as the pieces began to fall into place, with a prime location secured and the necessary permits and licenses obtained, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment that went far beyond the mere act of opening a business. This was her victory lap, her chance to rise from the ashes of her past and emerge as a stronger, more resilient version of herself. She had faced down her demons, her tormentors, and she had come out on top, not just legally and financially, but emotionally and spiritually as well. As the grand opening day drew near, Maya found herself filled with a nervous excitement that was tempered by a quiet confidence. She knew, deep down, that she was ready for this, ready to take on the world and prove that she was more than just a wronged wife or a victim of circumstance. And when the doors finally opened and the first customers began to trickle in, drawn by the tantalizing aroma of fresh-baked pastries and the warm, inviting atmosphere, Maya felt a surge of pride and accomplishment that was unlike anything she had ever experienced before. This was her baby, her creation, a tangible manifestation of her hard-won victory over adversity and betrayal. And as she looked around at the smiling faces of her customers, she couldn't help but feel like she had finally found her true calling. As the day drew to a close and the last customer had been served, Maya and Ethan stood side by side, surveying the fruits of their labor with a sense of quiet satisfaction. "We did it, Mom," Ethan said, giving her a gentle nudge with his elbow. "We really did it." Maya nodded, a contented smile playing across her lips. "Yes, we did," she replied. "And this is just the beginning." As she looked towards the bright, promising future that lay ahead, Maya knew that she had finally found her path, a path forged not by the expectations of others, but by her own strength, determination, and unwavering spirit. And as she prepared to embark on this new chapter of her life, she couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude, not just for the hard-won lessons and triumphs of her past, but for the simple joy and freedom that came with finally being true to herself. It had been a long, winding road, but in the end, Maya had emerged victorious, not just over her betrayers, but over the doubts and insecurities that had once threatened to consume her. And as she looked ahead to the endless possibilities that awaited her, she knew that nothing and no one would ever hold her back again.